Thanksgiving was the day my parents officially chose my sister over me. They told me not to come home because my sister said she wanted peace and not a childish drama from me. So I ate alone in a restaurant, until the family at the next table changed my life forever. 6 years later, they're my legal family, and when the people who abandoned me finally found out, they couldn't hold their breath. In my family, my sister Emily was the center of gravity. Everything bent toward her needs, her moods, her version of events. If she was happy, the house was calm. If she was upset, the rest of us learned to move carefully, like furniture being rearranged around her emotions. I was the opposite. Not loud enough to demand attention. Not fragile enough to be protected. Not difficult enough to be managed. I existed in the gaps. Growing up, I was praised for being easy. For not causing problems. For understanding when things weren't about me. That praise followed me like a warning label. By the time I was 28, I already knew my role. Emily was married, living 5 minutes from my parents, with 2 kids and a third always being hinted at. She dropped by unannounced. Borrowed money she didn't repay. Started arguments and walked away from them, leaving my parents to smooth things over. I lived 3 hours away. I worked long hours. I showed up on holidays with gifts, helped in the kitchen, cleaned up afterward, and drove home alone. Whenever tension came up, it was never framed as Emily's behavior. It was always my reaction to it. Just ignore her, Kate. You know how she is. Don't make this a thing. I learned to swallow words until they burned. The Thanksgiving everything finally broke wasn't dramatic at first. It started with a text. 3 days before the holiday. From my mother. Hey honey. Just wanted to let you know we're keeping Thanksgiving very low-key this year. Emily feels like there's been a lot of tension lately, and she really wants a peaceful day. Maybe it's best if you skip this one. We can do something another time. I read it twice. Then a third time. Then I noticed what wasn't there. No, I'm sorry. No, this isn't fair. No, we'll miss you. Just logistics. Just removal. I called her immediately. She didn't answer. I called my father. Straight to voicemail. I called Emily. She picked up on the second ring. Oh, she said, her voice light. You saw the message. Why don't you want me there? I asked. She laughed softly. Kate, it's not about you. I just don't want drama. What drama? I said. I haven't even seen you in months. You always make things uncomfortable, she replied. With your looks. Your silence. It's tense. I stared at the wall of my apartment, trying to understand how my existence had become a disruption. So the solution is to uninvite me? I asked. Well, she said, it's not my house. But it was her decision. And we both knew it. That night, I didn't cry. I cleaned my apartment. I folded laundry. I answered emails. I acted like someone who had already accepted something long before it was spoken out loud. But around midnight, I opened my calendar. Thanksgiving was empty. No backup invitation. No alternate plan. I realized something then that settled cold and heavy in my chest. They hadn't assumed I'd have anywhere else to go. They hadn't worried about that at all. The morning of Thanksgiving, I drove without a destination. I passed exits I knew by heart. Roads that would have taken me to my parents' house. Roads I wasn't welcome on anymore. I told myself I'd just get food somewhere. Eat quickly. Pretend it was any other Thursday. By the time hunger finally forced me to stop, I was an hour outside the city, pulling into a small restaurant just off the highway. It wasn't festive. No decorations. No music. Just warm light and the low murmur of conversation. Perfect. I asked for a table for one. The hostess hesitated for half a second, long enough for me to notice, then led me to a small table near the window. As I sat down, the weight of it hit me. Table for one. On Thanksgiving. I kept my coat on. The family next to me arrived 10 minutes later. I noticed them without trying. A man and a woman in their late 50s. A younger man, maybe early 30s. Another woman around my age. They laughed easily. Not loudly. Comfortably. They talked about traffic. About burned pies. About who forgot what. Normal things. Painfully normal. I focused on my menu like it was a shield. But then something happened that caught me off guard. The older woman, Margaret, I would later learn, looked at me. Not glanced. Looked. Her eyes softened in a way that felt intentional. She leaned toward her husband and whispered something. He turned, followed her gaze, then nodded. A moment later, Margaret stood up. She walked over to my table. "I hope this isn't intrusive," she said gently, "but are you here alone today?" I hesitated. I didn't know why that question felt dangerous. "Yes," I said finally. She smiled, not pitying, just kind. "Well," she said, "we have more food than we could possibly eat, and my husband gets offended when leftovers go to waste. Would you like to join us?" I almost said no. Reflex. But something about her tone, like the invitation was normal, not charitable, stopped me. I nodded. "Okay," I said. Pulling my chair up to their table felt unreal. Like stepping into someone else's life by accident. They introduced themselves slowly, without overwhelming me. Margaret. Tom. Their son. Ethan. Their daughter-in-law, Claire. No one asked why I was alone. No one asked where my family was. They talked around me at first, letting me listen. Letting me exist without pressure. When food arrived, Margaret noticed I hadn't taken much. "Eat," she said softly. "Please." Something in her voice broke through a wall I didn't know I was holding. I did. By the time dessert came, I was laughing. Not nervously. Actually laughing. At something Ethan said about burning a turkey in college and setting off the dorm alarm. I hadn't laughed like that in months. Maybe years. When it was time to leave, Margaret hugged me. Not briefly. Not awkwardly. Like someone who meant it. "Thank you for spending Thanksgiving with us," she said. As if it had been mutual. I didn't think I'd see them again. I assumed it was a kindness meant to live and die in that moment. But the next day, I had a text from an unknown number. "This is Margaret from Thanksgiving. I hope you made it home safely. If you ever want company for coffee, we'd love that." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "I'd like that." What followed wasn't instant transformation. It wasn't rescue. It was consistency. Coffee once. Then again. Then dinner a month later. They never asked me to explain my family. They didn't need justification to include me. And slowly, without realizing it, I started telling the truth. Meanwhile, my biological family carried on as if nothing had happened. No apology. No follow-up invitation. No acknowledgement. Emily posted photos from Thanksgiving. Smiling faces. Full table. Captioned, "Grateful for peace." I muted her. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. By the time Christmas came, I didn't expect an invitation. And I didn't get one. Instead, Margaret asked what my plans were. I told her I was working. She nodded, like she knew that was a lie people tell when they don't want to explain loneliness. "Well," she said, "we'd love to have you again. If you'd like." This time, I didn't hesitate. I didn't realize then that I was crossing a line. Not between families. Between lives. I was stepping out of the role I'd been assigned. And people who benefit from your silence always notice when you stop playing it. When Emily finally called me in January, her tone was sharp. "So," she said, "I hear you've been spending holidays with strangers now." "They're not strangers," I replied. She scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said calmly. "I'm being included." She hung up on me. That was the moment I understood something crucial. They didn't miss me. They missed control. And losing that would matter later. Very much later. People think revenge has to be loud. Confrontations. Screaming. Public scenes. Final speeches. That's what movies teach us. But real revenge, the kind that lasts, doesn't announce itself. It settles quietly into place while the people who deserve it are still convinced they're in control. That's what happened with my parents. They didn't realize they were losing me. They assumed I would orbit back eventually. That I would cool down. That I would stop being sensitive and re-enter my assigned position in the family structure. They underestimated one thing. I had stopped waiting. The years after that second Thanksgiving passed slowly and steadily, like something being built correctly for the first time. Margaret and Tom didn't rush closeness. They didn't try to replace anything. They didn't say things like "we're your family now" or "you're ours." They simply acted like it was already true. I had a key to their house by the third year. Not ceremonially. Just practical. "In case you ever need it," Tom said, handing it to me like it was the most normal thing in the world. I didn't cry in front of them. I waited until I was alone in my car. Ethan and I grew closer in a way that felt inevitable, but never forced. We didn't label anything at first. We cooked together. Took long drives. Shared silences that didn't itch. He noticed things other people missed. If I flinched at sudden noise. If I went quiet when conversations turned toward family. If I apologized too quickly. One night, after everyone else had gone to bed, he asked gently, "Do you ever feel like you're bracing for something that isn't coming?" I stared at the sink. "All the time," I said. He nodded. "Me too. I just didn't grow up punished for it." That honesty mattered. He wasn't trying to fix me. He was standing next to me. My biological family stayed distant, but not silent. Emily checked in when she needed something. A favor. A reference. Information. She spoke to me like I was a tool she'd left in a drawer and suddenly remembered. I stopped responding. Not dramatically. Not with explanations. Just, not at all. My parents noticed eventually. My mother left voicemails asking if I was okay. My father sent texts that ended with question marks, like that counted as effort. They never apologized. They never acknowledged Thanksgiving. They framed my absence as stubbornness. That suited me fine. When Ethan proposed, it wasn't a question. It was a statement. He took me back to the same restaurant where we'd met. Same booth. Same window. "I don't want to build a life with someone who's still waiting to be chosen," he said. "I want to build one with you. As you are. As you've become." I said yes. And for the first time in my life, I didn't wonder if I was making a mistake by trusting happiness. Wedding planning clarified something I'd been circling for years. My parents weren't confused about me. They were comfortable without me. And that meant they didn't get to reappear for the celebration. I didn't call them. I didn't send an invitation. Margaret asked once, carefully, if I wanted help navigating that conversation. "I don't," I said. "There's nothing to navigate." She nodded. "Then we'll handle whatever comes," she said. The legal adoption happened quietly. No party. No announcement. Just paperwork, a judge, and two people who chose me without negotiation. When the judge asked if I understood the permanence of the decision, I smiled. "I do," I said. "That's the point. I took their last name. Not to erase my past, but to mark my future." The fallout came when the wedding announcements went out. Someone shared a photo online. Someone else tagged the wrong person. And suddenly, my phone lit up. My mother called first. I let it ring. My father followed. Then Emily. Then relatives I hadn't heard from in years. I answered one call. My aunt. Her voice was tight. Your parents are shocked. I said nothing. They didn't know you'd changed your name. I didn't tell them, I replied calmly. There was silence on the line. You didn't think they should know? I smiled, though she couldn't see it. They knew when they needed to, I said. They didn't when I did. They showed up anyway. Of course they did. Families like mine always believe access is permanent. They arrived at the venue early, as if timing could fix entitlement. When they saw Margaret and Tom greeting guests as my parents, something in my mother's face collapsed. She approached me with tears already loaded, like a weapon she expected to work. Kate, she said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. This isn't the time, I said. When is? She demanded. I looked at her. And for the first time, I felt nothing. There was a time, I replied. You used it. My father tried next. He didn't yell. He went quiet. That was always his tactic. You embarrassed us, he said. I laughed once. Not loudly. Just enough. You disinvited me from a holiday, I replied. You don't get to talk about embarrassment. Emily stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes hard. You're really doing this, she said. After everything? Yes, I said. After everything. Security escorted them out before the ceremony began. No scene. No shouting. Just removal. The way I had once been removed. The wedding was beautiful. Not because it was perfect. Because it was honest. I stood between the people who raised me by choice, not obligation. And as I said my vows, I realized something sharp and final. I wasn't reclaiming anything. I was replacing it. The revenge didn't end there. It deepened. Slowly. Years passed. Ethan and I built a life that looked boring to outsiders and felt extraordinary to us. A home. Routines. Stability. We had a daughter. And then a son. Margaret and Tom were grandparents in every way that mattered. Present. Involved. Protective. My parents watched from a distance. They pretended not to understand. They sent gifts that went unopened. Cards without return addresses. Apologies that were almost apologies. I never responded. Then came the day they truly understood. It was at a community event. Small town, unavoidable. My mother approached Margaret. Introduced herself. Said my name. Margaret smiled politely. Oh, she said, Kate doesn't speak much about her biological parents. Biological. My mother's face went pale. But she's happy, Margaret added. That's what matters. My mother cried in her car. I know because Emily told me later. She expected sympathy. She didn't get it. People eventually stopped asking why I was estranged. The story settled into fact. And facts don't argue. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that Thanksgiving. The text message. The empty calendar. The table for one. And I realize something important. They didn't lose me that day. They showed me who they were. And once you see that clearly, you don't unsee it. The coldest part of revenge isn't punishment. It's irrelevance. My parents still exist. They just don't exist to me. And that's the consequence they never planned for. Moral lessons. If you think love is guaranteed by blood, you'll treat people as disposable. If you think peace means silencing one person for another's comfort, you'll eventually lose both. I didn't destroy my family. They replaced themselves. And I let them. Because the strongest revenge isn't anger. It's moving forward so completely that the people who hurt you become footnotes in a story they thought they were writing. I stopped being their daughter the day they told me not to come home. And I became myself the day I didn't go back.